Hello, and welcome to this Authors Guild Foundation event from Manuscript to Marketplace, featuring Autumn Song, Essays on Absence by Patrice Gopo. This series features the author of a recent book in conversation with members of their publishing team. It's sort of a case study, and it's part of our Business Bootcamps for Writers series, where you can learn all about the path to publication and the business of being a writer. You can find more under the resources section at authorsguild.org, lots of past events in the series. And the series is made possible with support of Penguin Random House and our many donors. So thank you to everyone. Patrice, thank you so much for being here. Courtney and Rosemary, it's good to have you. I'll read your bios just so the audience knows you a bit. Patrice is an award-winning essayist who writes stories steeped in themes of place, belonging, and home. She's the author of 2 essay collections, Autumn Song and All the Colors We Will See. Her debut picture book, All the Places We Call Home, is based on one of her essays. When she's not writing, she hosts a podcast called Picture Books Are for Grown-Ups Too, because she believes in the power of stories to help build connections between people. She lives with her family in North Carolina. Courtney Ochsner is an acquisitions editor at the University of Nebraska Press. She acquires trade creative works, oversees the series-based poetry program, and manages the Backwaters Press annual poetry contest. Rosemary Sikora is marketing and sales manager at the University of Nebraska Press. She has a Bachelor of Journalism degree and a Master's in English, both from UNL. That's great. You both went to UNL. And Rosemary started her publishing career as a book publicist in 2012. So, Courtney, I wanted to start with you first telling us about the American Lives series. This beautiful book is part of that series. So yeah, tell us about the press and the series, please.
So the series was created by the current editor-in-chief of Plowshares Magazine, Lynette Randolph, with the ultimate goal to feature creative works that provide glimpses into singular American lives. So we've continued the series now for, I think we're at 25 years, Rosemary, is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, I think we're
about
celebrate an anniversary in the next couple of years. So
yeah, it's been a really great series. It can encompass a wide range of, people's experiences. So, it's not super narrow, but it's a great one to work on.
That's great. And Rosemary, why don't you tell us a little more about the scope of your job in marketing and sales?
Sure. So yeah, I am the marketing and sales manager. I have a team of 8 people, including myself, because I am a working manager. In our marketing department, we work on, the nuts and bolts of sales and marketing and publicity and promotion, trying to offer support to our authors any way that we can. We do, pretty standard industry practice procedures for a lot of marketing, and then we try to work with authors one-on-one to see what their particular expectations for their book is and see how we can best work together.
Sounds great. Now, Patrice has a presentation prepared. It's going to walk us through the process. Looking forward to this. To the audience, there's a Q&A box. Feel free to enter questions there if there's anything you need clarification on, but we'll save time at the end for Q&A. So you can expect to get some questions answered toward the end of the hour. Patrice?
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Johnny. Thank you just for hosting this event for us. And again, Courtney and Rosemary, thank you so much for being part of this. I'm just really excited to share about this process of, this collection getting into the world, but also the process of working with the University Press, because I think that is maybe somewhat unique to how maybe publishing works. There's some unique elements to this that I think it's going to be really interesting for us to talk about. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Hope we tested this before. So are you seeing that? Yeah, okay. I think that is up there. And okay, so Johnny mentioned, just a little bit about me, but just to give you the quick sense, the book that most recently came out that we're talking about here today is Autumn Song, Essays on Absence. And just the quick summary of that is it really is about one Black woman's experiences encountering absences, seeing beyond empty spaces, and grasping at the glimmers of glory that might remain. That's how I like to think of this particular book. And I want to say it slightly distinguishing it from my first collection, All the Colors We Will See, which I felt was much more like a memoir and essays. And I think that matters for this discussion, whereas this book feels much more as though it is revolving around this theme, this larger theme of absence. So, and then as Johnny mentioned already, I have a picture book and I have a podcast as well. But just to let you all know, this is where we're headed today. I'm going to just show you the timeline of this process from the book going on submission to the actual publication date. And then we're going to break that down and talk about the submissions process, the acquisitions process. We'll talk a little bit about editing and design, and then we'll also talk about marketing and publicity. And along the way, I have some different questions to ask Courtney and Rosemary to expand on some of the different elements. And certainly, Johnny, if any other questions come in that will help clarify our conversation, please feel free to ask those as well. But this is where we're headed. So let's talk about the timeline first. All right, so this is the Autumn Song timeline. And the things that I want to point out, you're going to see this timeline again, everyone. So don't worry, it's coming back to you. And I also just maybe want to offer the fact that some of these slides, there's going to be a lot of information on them. There's going to be some sample letters and things like that. We're not going to read all of that, but I did make this presentation that I hope anyone out there can use as a resource. So please feel free to take screenshots if that might be helpful. And at the end, I will give you a link where you can actually download the PDF of the slides on my website if that might be helpful for you as well. So just know there's going to be a lot of content, but you will have access to it. But the things that I really want to point out here with this particular timeline is, let's look at the start date of when the submission process began, which was April of 2021. So in April of 2021, this is when this manuscript went on submission with the University of Nebraska Press. And then it was June of 2022 when I actually signed the contract with the University of Nebraska Press. So the end of the submissions process and the end of the submission acquisitions process was there. And then the last date that I want to just draw your attention to here is the 1st of September of 2023. So that was the official launch date for Autumn Song. So if you think about that timeline, I just broke this down into this smaller, more condensed way of looking at it. The whole process took 2 years and 4 months from that April 2021 submission to the 1st of September launch date. And actually right in the middle, which I found this really interesting, I didn't realize this until I was putting the slides together, right there in the middle in June of 2022, that's when I signed that contract with the University of Nebraska Press. So it was 1 year and 2 months to contract, and then from contract, another year and 2 months until pub date. So I just want to offer to everybody that while it looks like it was split in half, what it felt like emotionally, that 1 year and 2 months from query to contract felt infinitely longer than that 1 year and 2 months from contract to launch date. And that's just the reality of what it is when we're waiting and we don't necessarily know exactly what's going on. So I just wanted to say that as well as we're continuing to move through this. So let's move and talk a little bit about submissions here and what happened. So we're going to be talking right here about April 2021, when the submission process began. So this is when the query letter and the proposal were sent to the University of Nebraska Press, specifically to Courtney. They were emailed to Courtney. And I just want to say a little bit, share here just a little bit about who, me, what was going on with me at this particular time as I was submitting this particular essay collection, Autumn Song Essays on Absence. So one of the first things I want to point out is this was an unagented submission to the University of Nebraska Press. So I actually did have an agent at the time that that agent and I no longer work together. But at the time, that agent had let me know that placing a project with a small press or a university press, that wasn't really what she did. And so this project was unagented, and I was the one who was actually looking for the publication home for that project on my own. And part of what helped me even begin to think about how to do that is over the years, I had been just gathering a list of small and university presses where I really liked the work that they were doing. I was interested in it. I was reading it. I felt like it could potentially be a fit for myself. So this was kind of an informal process that I had been doing over the years. It wasn't just then but I did start doing more research as I realized that I was going to be submitting this on my own too. So I created a spreadsheet that had a few of these small and university presses that looked promising. And in the spreadsheet, I would include things like the submission guidelines, who the editor was there, how they wanted you to submit, to query them or submit a proposal, anything like that. In addition to that, in spring of 2021, I had attended a webinar with the North Carolina Writers Network, and the webinar was all about university presses. And I just wanted to share that because there was this moment as I was in that webinar, and I had this kind of thought, this book really belongs with a university press. And I don't know what it was that this person was saying, but as they were talking about the process, and as they were maybe talking about often what the mission and hope is for university presses, the kind of work that they want to bring into the world, I just had this kind of like, I think that's the kind of stuff that I do, and I think I might like that. So that was just something that, was encouraging for me. And so again, that's what I'm saying. It felt like Autumn Song would be a good fit. And then the other thing I just want to point out is I was nearly finished with the manuscript for Autumn Song. There may have been a couple essays in there that I was still revising, but that manuscript was nearly solid and ready to be out there. So that's just something else that I wanted to point out about where I was in the spring of 2021. And so it was at this time, oh, sorry, I'm not advancing here. Oh, still not. Sorry, hold on one second. Oh, okay, there we go. All right. So I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but this is actually the query letter that I sent to Courtney. And one thing that I want to point out here, I'm going to just read a couple sentences from the very beginning of this query letter. It says, "We all live lives littered with what we leave behind, places we once lived, friendships we once had, dreams we once envisioned, the people we once were." So it goes on and summarizes this book. The thing that I think is really neat about this, everyone, is that these paragraphs that I've highlighted here, they are so close to the back cover copy of Autumn Song. So from the beginning, I had created a really strong summary of what this book was going to be, strong enough that it continued to follow us through the whole process of publication. And so I'm just wondering, Courtney, at this point, is there anything that you remember about this query letter particularly that made you want to read the proposal and find out more?
Well, the project sounded interesting, and a couple things really stood out, which I know this sounds maybe ridiculous, but 55,000 words, good length. It was, a decent manuscript size, and your author platform stood out already, where you already have that previous book. And it was a Barnes & Noble Discover Great New Writers selection. So you kind of had, everything going for you that's like, okay, this next book is probably something I should take some time and actually sit down and read the full manuscript. Yeah, it was a great query letter. Did exactly what it needed to do.
Great. Well, thanks. And I think that's really interesting that you mentioned the word count, because I feel like this is a subject that comes up a lot, especially in the world of essay collections, is how long should an essay collection be? What's too short? But it sounds like from what you're saying, there is a desire for a particular kind of, like 55,000 words seems like a good size to you, is what you were saying. That's great. That's really helpful. And I'll just also point out to anyone who ends up reading this whole letter, I did include my bio. It was just after the closing and it didn't really fit on the screen, so it's not there. But it was part of the query letter. So moving on a little bit, one of the things when I sent this query letter, so I followed the instructions on the University of Nebraska website about how you send the query and all of that. And when I sent the query letter, the other part that I included was the proposal for Autumn Song. So this wasn't the full manuscript, it was just a proposal for Autumn Song. And these were the elements that the University of Nebraska Press requested would be included in the proposal. I think a couple things that I'll just point out from this list is having that overview of the book was really important. So this was more than just that 2-paragraph summary that I shared in the query letter. This was probably maybe a page and a half or something like that, that gave an overview of the particular book. The other thing that I think is really important to think about is, who is this book for? And sharing that information in the proposal. So the intended audience, and part of the intended audience is thinking about the comparable titles that might exist for your book as well. And then the last thing I wanted to mention out of this list is a summary of my platform. So for that, yeah, to some extent, there was some social media things that I mentioned, but I also shared podcasts that I'd been on before. I shared speaking engagements I'd had, and just other ways in which I would have some reach in letting people know about this particular book. So Courtney, actually, I feel like I'm about to ask you a question I didn't let you know in advance, but I'm just curious if you might comment for a moment about the impact platform had. So you said that in the query letter, you mentioned that, and I think everyone here would love to hear a little bit more, just even from your perspective, of the importance of platform, or what that means, or how important is it actually? And maybe I should say, how important is social media in this?
I can answer to part of that, and I might have Rosemary jump in. Author platforms become increasingly important. An advantage working at the University Press, like, you can take on projects that are more unique, or, that might not have as large an audience, but we still need an author that's willing to put themselves out there, and, try to get this book in the hands of the audience that we're kind of setting up for it. So yeah, it's become more important. Rosemary?
Yeah, and no, I agree. And I'll just offer too that for the marketing department and really the whole press, I mean, we see our relationships with our authors as partnerships. So, we can offer, you marketing advice and strategies, but it's so important to have that partner who's also willing to put in the work. So as long as we can see that, an author like Patrice, like yourself, that's already, you know what you're doing, you're ready to promote, and we'll be ready to promote too. So social media, it ebbs and flows, and we can definitely talk about that as part of the platform later. I have some thoughts on that, but it's important, I would say, overall.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, both of you. And I think it's really interesting to point out how you both said it's important, but I think you've said it's important, not necessarily in the ways that sometimes we as authors always take it in, that we need to have like 50,000 followers on Instagram or something, that it sounds like it shows up in different types of ways. And one thing that feels really critical is, how willing are we to work towards helping to promote our books, and how can we actually go about doing that? So I think that's really helpful for people. So I'm going to keep us moving along here, and we're going to start talking a little bit about the acquisitions process. So submissions runs into acquisitions here. And what happened in July of 2021 was a very happy day for me because Courtney's email was in my inbox, and she said that she would like to read the full manuscript at this point. So at this point, I'd only sent her the query and the proposal, and there was a request for the full manuscript. So I'm going to so this is a timeline that I mentioned, and I want to share. So this is kind of the timeline of acquisitions, of how that happened. So Courtney requests the full manuscript at this point. So Courtney, I'm just curious, when you did request the full manuscript, I guess what else in the particular proposal would have made you want to request that full manuscript? And did you find things like the comp titles helpful in the proposal, or anything like that?
It would be the sample essay. Like, it was beautifully written.
Okay.
So yes, I want to read the full manuscript because you know what you're doing. Also comp titles help. It's being able to see that you've been able to engage with potential audiences. You kind of know where you want to, target this book. Like, Patrice, you're kind of the perfect author. You you went through and did your research and put together a great proposal. So it was an easy, request after I finally got, to actually looking it over and going, oh, okay, of course, this looks great. And like I said, the sample was really beautifully written, so I was excited to read the full manuscript. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you explaining that. And that's really helpful too, because I do think sometimes as authors, we can get very caught up in getting that perfect query letter, getting that perfect proposal. And it sounds like those things do matter, but ultimately the writing matters. And what is the writing like? And so, so I think that's just a really great encouragement. So you requested the full manuscript, Courtney, in July. And then at the end of the year, you wrote to tell me another really exciting element of information, which was that Autumn Song was going to the external review. So before we get to that fact that Autumn Song was going to the external review, I think I may have sent you an email between July and December at some point just to follow up. And I think that's something that people out there often want to know is, when is it appropriate to actually follow up with an editor? And do you have any thoughts about that?
I think 2 months is a good timeline to follow up. And it's just ideally I'd have reviewed everything and gotten back to you one way or another. But depending on workload, submission load, I am usually behind. So it's nice to get a follow-up email just to get back on my radar and back on my, okay, have you on my list? I need to get back to you. So 2 months is good. But it's a heavy workload. So I know people are always eager to get a response. And so I appreciate patience because, it can take some time sometimes, as you saw on your timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one thing that I just want to encourage people is, now that you're hearing actual timelines, it can be really helpful just to kind of have that sense of what's going on. And also for us as authors to remember, editors out there, they have a lot that is happening. And it, based on what Courtney has shared here, in a reasonable amount of time, she welcomes the follow-up. So I think that's helpful to remember too. So I know my particular philosophy is, whatever time. So if Courtney has now said 2 months, I would probably give it 2 months and then some before I just follow up. So that's, something I would offer. But you told me in that email that Autumn Song was going to the external review, which I actually knew what that meant because I had sat in on that webinar about university presses, but I feel like a lot of people have no idea what that means about the book is going to the external review. So would you just share a little bit about what does that mean for people?
So the peer review is a kind of a defining feature of a scholarly press. And so, all of our titles are peer reviewed, and for the trade titles, they do receive at least one review. I would say the advantage of a peer review is we're able to send it to an expert in the field, and, you get typically valuable advice on, how to maybe, not reshape, but there are things that you can tweak to the manuscript to make it obviously better. And, I value the peer review process because it kind of gives us a launching point after we get the peer review back, where it's okay, where are we at with the manuscript? Do we agree with the review? Where do we go from here? So I find it a very helpful process, I think, for myself and for the author in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a very interesting process because I think for me as the author, I wasn't quite sure, does this mean that the peer reviewer makes the decision about this, or is it a piece of information that is then utilized by the press? And I think what you're saying is, it sounds like this is information that you as the editor then utilizes to make your decision about what you would like to do.
Exactly. So, I usually don't send anything out for review unless I'm, pretty 100% positive that this is something I want to bring forward to, ask to our editorial board to ask to offer a contract. And so, sometimes, we'll get a revise and resubmit back or something like that. And it might, I always give the author an option. Yes, you want to revise? This is great. Bring it back to me after you've done it, and we'll do it again. Basically, the process again. But we, for the editorial board to usually give the go ahead, we do need a positive report. But like I said, I usually won't move forward with something unless I'm on board and pretty positive it's going to get a good report.
Right. Okay. Yeah, actually, I feel like I've just learned a little bit about this process here too, in that. So that's really interesting how that happens. I guess one other question I might ask that people might have is, for creative works, how do you determine who, you don't need to obviously tell me who did the peer review for this, but how would you determine who you might ask to do a peer review?
I usually look at kind of similar titles, comp titles, basically. Like I start off with, and I know I asked you also for like suggestions, so I kind of go off of that. I look at the comp titles too and go from there. So, I want someone that is going to be interested in the project, but I also want, their expertise too. So, I work off a lot of things to get a reviewer.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, so in April of 2022, you received that peer review back, the external review, and it was fabulous, which was just really encouraging for me. You sent me the letter, and it was really neat to see this external reviewer truly get this project that I was doing and had such encouraging words about the project. So one of the elements, though, that is part of the peer review is that then I needed to write a letter of response to, a letter of response to the external reviewer, to the editorial board for the University of Nebraska Press, which was something I'd never done before. So I needed to figure out, what that looked like. But part of what you asked me to do in that was that I needed to respond in some way to the suggestions that the external reviewer had raised. And so I'm going to share in my next slide here what that letter looked like, because what you were wanting to do at this point, if I'm understanding Courtney, is you wanted to take everything that you'd done and this external review to the editorial board, who could then give you approval of whether or not you could acquire this book. So let me get to that slide. So this is, again, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but this is an excerpt from my response letter that I wrote. And I just want to, if you look to the section that's highlighted, you'll see that I am addressing I am noting what the three primary areas that the external reviewer had indicated should be addressed. So revisions to the introductory essay, felt that there should be some different subheadings for the sections of the book, and then also removing or revising several essays. So what I ended up doing is one by one responding to each of those things. And I think it was important to note that I didn't necessarily have to agree with what the external reviewer said, but I needed to indicate how I was considering that, how I was thinking about it. So in terms of removing or revising some of the essays, I mentioned that I felt as though maybe a few of the essays were misplaced within the collection, and I wanted to work on reorganizing the collection in a different format, things of that nature. So that's just something I wanted to mention there. So it did go on to the editorial review and the editorial board, and it, passed, or however you would word that. And then you came back to me with the contract. So you sent me the contract for for Autumn Song, which was hugely exciting. That was very exciting. But as I mentioned earlier, everyone, I was unagented. So I was really, this contract, I'm looking at this thing, and I don't even know what a lot of this stuff means within this contract. But what I did know for sure is that I didn't want to sign something without fully understanding what was in the contract. So in May of 2023, this is when I reached out to the Authors Guild legal team, and I also reached out to some other writer friends. The writer friends I was more talking about the contract with, but with the Authors Guild, they actually read the contract for me, and they identified areas that they felt like I should work to negotiate on those, or which elements needed, they wanted different language. They were very helpful in that regard. And in addition, they were able to refer me to sections of what they call the Authors Guild model contract, which I believe is online. So anyone can access that to show me what kind of language that they wanted. And so it was kind of armed with, I don't know if armed, but I had this information. I was able to go back and talk to Courtney. I guess actually it wasn't just you, but we talked about negotiations on that particular contract, which I felt like, the press was really open and very helpful and worked to help me understand what was happening, why we could do some things and why we couldn't do some things. So I think that was really important. So something I would offer to people, if you're in that process, definitely reach out to the Authors Guild, because it's helpful to have that knowledge that you're bringing to the discussion. I think it's also really helpful to know your priorities, because you're not going to be able to make the contract exactly like what you want it to be, because this is really a partnership that people are working together to create something that's good for everyone. So because of that, there are going to be some things like give and take that happen. So I think it's really important to know your priorities. So one thing that I know was really important for me was that university presses, I believe that a standard practice is that they often will put the copyright in the name of the press, but that was something that was important to me, that I really wanted the copyright to be in my name. And it sounds like when I raised that, the press had no problem offering that to me. And is that correct? Would you have anything else to say about that?
That was a very good question. And so I asked our contracts and rights person about it, because I was like, I don't know why we don't, like, what was the reason? So I asked him, and he said, the standard is to have the copyright in the name of the Board of Regents for our scholarly titles. Where is it at now? Of course I didn't. I'll find it, Patrice. Anyway, we're very flexible on copyright and author's name. I think it ultimately, like, if you ever wanted the rights reverted back to you, it makes the process easier, but that's really the only thing it does. Yeah, I was surprised.
No, thank you so much. So I think that I just share that example because I do think as an author, potentially we might be negotiating our own contract. It could be easy to feel a little hesitant. Okay, are you able to hear me now? Okay, I'm sorry, my AirPods are close by and it suddenly just gave a message that my AirPods were like the thing. Didn't do anything, so I don't know if I might need to move them out of range momentarily. Hopefully that doesn't come up again. But whatever the case, I'm just encouraging people that I do think it can be easy for us to feel a little timid or hesitant to just express what would matter to us. So I just want to encourage people to know your priorities and think about what really does matter. So I felt really encouraged by that process of working through that. And so the contract got signed. And so now we're just going to move in and talk a little bit more about the editing and design process here. And so again, in the timeline, this editing and design process, it would have begun right at the same time as I'm signing the contract with the University of Nebraska Press. At that time, Courtney would have said to me, why don't you take the next, I think up until the end of August or early September, take that time to make the changes based on how you responded to the external reviewers. So there were some very set things that I had said I was going to go about doing. And so that was where that process really started. And so here I made this kind of fun timeline to show what was actually going on in this particular process here. So I think some key things that I just want to point out here. So September 2022, that's when I actually returned the edits to Courtney, and then she, responded to edits and all of that. And then later that autumn, I was assigned a project editor for the project. And Courtney, if maybe in just a second you could explain what that role is, because I don't know that people would necessarily know. But it started going through the copy editing process. And then by March of 2023, that was when I saw the cover options for the first time. So I don't know if Courtney, you want to just maybe say briefly what that project editor role is?
So the project editor basically shepherds the project through the copy editing and production process.
Okay.
So they kind of help handle communications between a copy editor and author and designer and author. So help shepherd it through the whole production. Mm-hmm.
And it was, yeah, Kayla was great. It was really helpful and just nice to know who you could contact and talk to about different things. So Rosemary, I am curious now here that I mentioned that in March of 2023, that's when I first saw these cover options for Autumn Song, and I loved both of them. They were beautiful. The one that we see here is the option that I selected. So I'm really grateful for the very thoughtful designs options that went into it. But I'm just wondering, what would have happened if I didn't like either cover option? How does that play out?
Sure. Yeah, so at Nebraska, we are very lucky to have a really strong group of designers who've been doing it for a number of years, are award-winning. If you absolutely hated the covers, they're very willing to go back and take a look and see what your, if you didn't like certain colors or the image was wrong. I mean, we're really, available for that feedback. And they're incredibly flexible and so kind, and they care about the product and they care about what they're designing. I will say though, there has been occasions where if an author doesn't like a cover for a certain reason, but maybe in-house the marketing team and myself feel it is the right cover and it makes sense and it's going to help sales, then we might have a bigger conversation and kind of go back and forth. But I think we're pretty willing to have those conversations. Maybe more so, at least from what I've heard from maybe some of the trade houses. We're very one-on-one. So that's some of the good, I guess, for university presses, is we do give that individual attention. And I will say this is actually one of my favorites of the season. So I was really glad you liked it.
I do. And actually, I get so many compliments on it, which is super funny because, I had nothing to do with it except I picked it. And, but I'm just like, me too. I love it too. And I think one thing I love about the cover is I feel as though it reflects so fully the content of it, that there's this contemplative feel to it, but somewhat mysterious. And I don't know, there's a lot that is happening there that I think is really beautiful that's going on. So I will point out to everyone that when the covers came in, I did ask a few questions. So I did kind of wanted to know, how is it going to actually be printed? I think I asked, is it going to be glossy or matte, or is it, some different things, just so I could get a good understanding. And I would just encourage people, ask a few questions, sit with it for a little bit, and maybe even print out the options you're given so you can hold them up in person, whatever, that they're not on your screen or something like that. So, but anyway, so that was the editing and design process. And I'm going to just keep us moving, and we'll talk, our final section is going to be about the marketing and publicity. So that actually really began, at least for me, in the autumn of 2023. So even while I was in the midst of the editing process, the marketing and publicity process began, because Rosemary sent me this email in autumn of 2022. Oh, maybe I said autumn of 2023 last time, but I meant to say Rosemary sent me this email in the autumn of 2022, where she was telling me that it would be now time to start looking into requesting those blurbs. So something that had happened months ago, around the time that the contract came, is that Courtney had sent me an author questionnaire, and part of that author questionnaire included people that I thought we could potentially approach about requesting blurbs for the book. And so now was the time, actually, because the University of Nebraska Press has a catalog that was going to go out in the spring, and the deadline for that catalog was December, and they really wanted to have a couple blurbs at that point. So that's when it started for me. And I reached out to 4 people were able to provide blurbs. So one thing that I want to encourage people to think about is, just along the way, keep a list of people you could potentially ask for a blurb, so that you're not feeling all stressed out when that actually happens. Not to say you won't feel stressed out to ask, because that is a stressful thing to do, but at least you will have a list of possible people. And that's something that I had been doing for myself, is just kind of keeping some notes about that. So Rosemary, I know I said I began the marketing and publicity process at this point. I don't know if there were other things that were going on behind the scene earlier that maybe you want to mention, or it might have been just this was the first step.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first outer step, I guess, for us internally. You know, we've already seen the book twice come through on memos and our decision to publish meeting, which is kind of a first glance of a book that Courtney would have brought your book to, that we would have first commented on then. And then once the book is launched to the house, kind of along this blurb process line is when we start to really think about how do we want to position this book? What does that cover copy look like? Who are these blurbers that you're, recommending or that you've gotten? They kind of help shape the way that we see the book as well. So really pretty early on, I guess about a year in advance is when we're really starting to think about how we're going to market the book.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I just noticed our time. We want to make sure there's time for questions. So I'm going to kind of just run through these last couple things here. So the next big marketing thing that happened, at least on my side, was I made a book announcement, and I announced that to my email list. I announced that on social media. I updated my website with pre-order links and all of that. And one of the things I want to point out here that happened is that UNP, they created some of these assets that I could use on social media to help announce that all. So that was really helpful and started to get kind of the energy and momentum going around the book. I would encourage people, if you don't already have an email list, you can actually start building it now. You don't have to wait until it's time to announce a book. So that would be something you might want to think about. And then in terms of marketing and publicity continuing, some things that I'll just point out here is I also created this document. It was a personal document for myself called Patrice's Marketing Efforts. So it was kind of this document and timeline of different things I was going to be doing, actions I was going to be taking. And I did share that with the UNP publicists, like some of those elements, but it was just to kind of keep me on track. But I think something big to point out that I was creating here was book discussion questions. I also had this pre-order gift of deleted essays, and the press actually came along and designed those. So while I created the content for them, they actually designed those things to help match the book and everything. So that was really a neat thing that I think was very helpful as I was creating that. So that's something else I would mention. And then in the summer of 2023, that's when my publicist shared the particularities of the marketing plan with me. So I'm gonna just keep moving along. Again, like I said, I'm not going to read all of this stuff, but just to point out a few marketing and publicity efforts here that, I mentioned that UNP designed those assets for me. I also created web pages on my website, ways people could support the book and things of that nature. So Rosemary, as we're kind of wrapping up this marketing and publicity effort section, I'm just wondering, is there anything here that you particularly felt was really helpful coming from my side as an author that I helped to support the efforts of the book?
Yeah, I think your request to us for these specially designed items isn't something that we do for every book, but I think it's important to note, and it kind of speaks to my earlier point about, it's a partnership and we want to see what the author's interested in doing and see how we can support that and also offer our own expertise. So that you have social media presence, that you have a website. I would say websites are crucial. I mean, we are in a digital world, so if you're not digital somehow, that's not helpful in the book. And you're really easy to communicate with and easy to work with, and that's always something we really, really appreciate, even just on a very basic level, one-on-one communication. Something like that's really important for the press because we knew where you were coming from and how we could help, and it was really easy.
Great. I'm so glad. Well, it's been great working with all of you too. So I think, I'm so thankful for that. So I think the last thing I'll just share with this with the publicity and marketing section, that this was super fun. Poets and writers gave a mention to Autumn Song, and it was in their page 1 where new and noteworthy books begin. So that was very neat to see. And then also, oh, maybe I went past it already. Oh, sorry guys. I think I've, oh, okay. I think I might have. I was going to show one last thing, but I think it must mean that we're supposed to do some questions right now. So, Johnny, if you want to come back, that'd be great, and we could do questions.
Oh no, you could keep going. It must have just clicked off, but that's
Okay.
okay.
All right. Maybe I'll see if I can. Yeah, I think it just kind of clicked off on me here, everyone. Sorry about that. Me and my tech stuff. Oh, so now it's all at the beginning. Anyways, everyone, I was just going to say there was the catalog that I had mentioned, and it was really neat because when I received the catalog that, Rosemary had initially asked those blurbs about, it was so fun to see the listing of the book, but then on the back, there was also the book too on the catalog. So I was really thrilled about that. And then, like I mentioned, the poets and writers mention. And so the last stage that we're at here is that the marketing and publicity, the book is out in the world, but marketing and publicity, it continues. It's an ongoing thing, and it happens in different ways. Like even, speaking at conferences, whatever it may be, these are all these different ways that it continues to unfold. So thank you so much, everyone. That is what we wanted to share here. And we do have time for questions. And I will get that link and put it in the chat. So if people want to download the slides, but I also want to say, go to the very last slide because I have a list of resources as well for anybody who's interested in just learning more about publishing with the University Press. So let me stop sharing my screen now. All right, that's when I really wanted to stop sharing my screen.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so we've got a hodgepodge of questions here. First, you may have specified this, but what did you submit with your proposal? The entire manuscript or less than that?
Okay. Yeah, no, it wasn't the whole manuscript. So if you go back to that slide when you download, you'll see there was a list of specific things, but it included one essay. So the University of Nebraska Press, they particularly just asked for one. I think they may have called it a sample chapter, but for an essay collection, it's just one essay. But different presses are going to ask for different things. I've seen different numbers along the way, but typically it's not the full manuscript.
Okay. And one writerly question, how did you define your audience for this collection?
Yeah, absolutely. So I defined my audience I actually looked at who has historically been interested in my work. So not just this particular book, but just thinking more broadly, who has been interested in my book. So I often write a lot around my experience of a Black American. I write about my experience as a child of immigrants. I'm the child of Jamaican immigrants. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. So these are themes I'm coming back to again and again. So when I thought about my audience, I was thinking a lot about people who are interested in reading stories that are exploring themes of place and home and racial identity formation. So that was often my primary audience. And then one of my secondary audiences was going to be people who were interested in essay collections, but also essay collections told in probably a very poetic and lyrical style as well. So that was another particular audience. And I think those two elements were really helpful in me feeling that UNP was going to be a good home for me because they have published work that fits within those audiences.
Mm-hmm. Now, we spoke a bit about platform, that Patrice had a previous book of essays, talked about social media, but some of the audience hasn't yet published a book. They're working on a manuscript. If someone doesn't have a social platform, is making a website and simply creating a social account what they should do? Is there anything in particular an unestablished writer, let's say, should do to stand out?
I would say, and Rosemary might be able to answer this better, just putting initial thought into it. Like, what can you do? What can you start doing to start creating this platform? If I know, if I can see at least you've thought about it, like you're like, these are areas I can start doing now. That's really what I need to see. And it's a good start.
Yeah, and I think even on a very, basic level, having a writer website or a website, dedicated to yourself as a writer, whether you're published or not, is really helpful because you can add to that throughout your career, right? Like if you're like Patrice and you're doing interviews and you're writing guest blog posts and you're doing op-eds, like you can link all those things to the website and you can continue to add to it, add new projects, have an in progress section. Not everyone has to be on every social platform. I want to make that very clear. I would never expect a sane person to do that. But having that core website, I think, is really useful for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, I will just add, as an author with my first book, where I feel as though my, I guess, platform was, it's definitely grown over the years. But I think some of the big things, to echo what Courtney and Rosemary were saying, is that sense of, one, having a web presence of some sort. And I think the other thing is really give some consideration to the ways in which you are connecting with people. I think sometimes we distill this down to social media numbers, and even if you're just starting out, there likely are ways in which you are connecting with other people in the community in different ways. And so, think about those things too as being part of your possible reach that might extend. And start an email list if you can, because that can be a great way to just like begin in a very small space.
Mhm. I wanted to say real quick about the contract stuff. So the Authors Guild, I put this in the chat with a link, but the Authors Guild model trade contract, the trade means not with an academic press. It's the standards for commercial contracts. But our lawyers can obviously advise you on university contracts. So just know if you're looking through that, it's based on industry standards for commercial presses, with, there's sort of like nice to have wish list items and like standards that you should really expect. So that's what they can advise you on for negotiating. A couple things about the process. Who does the peer review? Is it, in this case, a faculty member of the University of Nebraska?
It can be, I'm looking for a published author. And, if it's a nonfiction book, I want someone who's published a nonfiction, book. And like in Patrice's case, I was looking for someone that had already like published an essay collection. Like it does not need to be, a professor, but I'm looking for a writer, comparable book. So my reach is, large when I'm querying people, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Now back to marketing stuff for Patrice and Rosemary. A lot of people wanted to know more about blurbs. So is it mostly people you reach out to famous people, and what exactly do you send them? Like a PDF of the manuscript or an excerpt?
Yeah, this is a good question. So I feel as though, so maybe I'll just say from my side, Rosemary, and if you want to say something that adds to or differs or something. For me, I did reach out to people I had some sort of relationship with this particular book. With my first book, I actually did reach out more to people I didn't even necessarily know. But I think with this book, I really wanted people who were, I guess, in that intended audience to be the people who would actually blurb the book. And so I did reach out to people who I had some level of connection with. I was familiar with their work, and I felt like their name attached to this book would actually, be an encouraging thing to have there. And in terms of how I actually went about doing that, I personally began with a letter to them asking them if they would be interested in doing this, letting them know what the dates would be for it, and then letting them know if they are interested. I believe I said at that point I could send them a PDF of the manuscript that Rosemary had given me to send for this particular purpose. So does that sound quite right, Rosemary? I'm feeling a little fuzzy on how it exactly happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's really different with every author and every project, depending on your subject matter and the type of book it is. Because we've had authors that, do reach crazy hot, like they attempt to get a hold of whatever celebrity they think would be a good fit. So there's kind of no right or wrong way to do it. I think it kind of depends on what your comfort level is, and yeah, what your network is, and who you ultimately want to blurb the book. And we're willing to work with authors on that directly. But it's awesome. Can't emphasize enough how awesome it is when we just get the blurbs from the authors, because it is a huge help. I know a lot of people have different opinions on blurbs, whether they're good, they're bad, do they actually help, what do they do? But it's great to at least have a couple in hand early on, so we can get those in our metadata right away.
And one thing I will say too, that I think is really beneficial for blurbs from the author perspective, is that I do think as authors, the whole publishing, putting your work out, it's very vulnerable, and it can be sometimes just really nice to go back to a blurb that someone wrote about your book and just be like, right, someone loved this, and you're reminded of that. And I think that's similarly how I felt about the external review, is that it can feel really vulnerable and stressful at times. And then you can just go back and like, oh, but look at these beautiful words about the thing that I created. So.
Few people asked, is the peer reviewer paid for that?
We do not pay
do.
peer. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
We do pay peer reviewers. I was on blurb,
Oh, sorry,
thinking
yeah.
blurb. So, we do pay peer reviewers either an honorarium, or we offer payment in book, our UMP books as well. So.
Okay, great. How are decisions made about whether to do a hardcover or a paperback, and what sort of print run is standard for a book like this?
I can start, Courtney, and you can add in. Again, it goes back to the type of book it is. A lot of our creative nonfiction will be paperback initially to start. And then it really depends on, back to that word count and the length, how big the manuscript is, and what's a fair price point, what we think booksellers, would be willing to take the book at. And a lot of university presses, are still doing print runs here and there, but we're also doing print on demand strategies, which really help with a lot of logistics and inventory control, and making sure that books don't go out of print. It's a really great way that we can support our backlist and keep books in print that might not otherwise ever be printed again. Not so much of our front list stuff, but that kind of speaks more to our backlist. Courtney, I don't know if you want to add anything else. Oh no, we lost sound. But yeah, for Patrice's collection, I mean, paperback made total sense. We wanted to have, be accessible, get it into as many hands, as many bookstores as we can. Yeah.
Well, it's been an hour. We should wrap up here, but I'll ask you, Patrice, before we go, what do you have planned for the future? I know you do speaking engagements and such. Do you have plans on the long tail for the book?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that it definitely continue to put efforts forth in helping to promote the book, helping people learn about it. Some of the things I love doing are things just like what we're doing here, or I will also be at AWP in February, and I'm going to be part of a couple panels. There's a few other conferences that I'm going to be taking part in. And so that is work that's continuing to work towards people learning about the book, but I also am continuing to work on additional new projects and things. As I mentioned, I write picture books as well. So there's a few of those coming up in the pipeline too.
Great. Well, congrats on the book. It's lovely. And thank you all so much for doing this. And thank you to the press for being flexible on copyright. Authors Guild always loves to hear that. We'll do another one of these events in a few weeks. I think it's going to be a novel from a small press with an agent present, so that'll be a different kind of thing. We love doing this series. It's so great to hear this behind the scenes, candid information. We really appreciate your time and openness with that.
Thank you so much, John. And actually, before I forget, everyone, I put a link in the chat where if you want to download the PDF of the slides, you can find them right there. So if anyone wants those will be available. I'll have them available on my website through Monday. So if anyone wants that, please feel free to do that. But sorry, I was about to say thank you so much, Johnny. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Courtney, Rosemary, Patrice, thanks again. Have a good day.
All right, everyone, take care. Thank you.